The second time I watched my uncle's textbook fall toward the rubbish bin, I caught it before the cover touched the black plastic. My cousin Nathan's hand remained suspended in the air. For one strange second, neither of us moved. Dust drifted between us in the narrow attic, turning gold in the afternoon light. Outside, rain tapped against the old slate roof, soft and patient, exactly as it had on the day I first died. "Clara," Nathan said, stretching my name into a warning. "Put it back." I tightened my grip around the cracked green cover. The book was heavier than I remembered. Its title, Principles of Structural Failure, had nearly vanished beneath years of scratches. My late Uncle Elias had written his name inside the front cover in black fountain pen. Beneath it, in smaller letters, he had added a sentence I had never noticed in my first life. "A building collapses twice. First in truth, then in the story told afterward." My throat closed. In my first life, I had laughed at that line. I had called it dramatic. Then I had obeyed Nathan, dropped the textbook into the bin, and watched the council truck carry it away with the rest of Uncle Elias's belongings. 3 months later, I was accused of stealing Nathan's research. 6 months later, my scholarship vanished. A year later, Uncle Elias's death was officially ruled an accident caused by his own negligence. And 18 months after that, I stood in the basement archive of Westbridge Institute with smoke pressing against the ceiling while Nathan locked the fire door from the other side. I remembered pounding on the glass. I remembered seeing his silhouette through the wired window. I remembered his mouth forming the words, "I'm sorry," although his face showed nothing close to regret. Then I remembered waking in my childhood bedroom on the morning of Uncle Elias's estate clearance, alive again, 22 years old, with rain against the windows and a full day of betrayal waiting to repeat itself. Now Nathan was staring at the textbook in my hands. His expression had not changed much since the day he left me to burn. He still wore concern like a tailored jacket. His dark hair was neat, his voice measured, his posture relaxed. To anyone else, he looked like the responsible nephew helping his grieving aunt clear an attic. To me, he looked like a locked door with smoke behind it. "That thing is moldy," he said. "Uncle Elias kept every useless book he ever touched. Throw it away before Aunt Mira sees you making this harder." I glanced toward the attic stairs. Aunt Mira was downstairs sorting photographs. Nathan's father, my Uncle Roland, had gone to meet the solicitor. The house groaned around us as the wind strengthened. I opened the textbook. Nathan moved too quickly. His hand shot toward the cover, but I stepped back. The floorboards creaked beneath my heel. "Careful," he said. It sounded like concern. It was not. I turned one page, then another. The paper smelled of dust, damp wool, and the peppermint oil Uncle Elias used to rub into his wrists when arthritis made it difficult for him to write. His notes filled the margins in tiny blue script. Equations, arrows, dates, names shortened to initials. And on page 47, a single line had been underlined so violently that the pen had torn the paper. Progressive collapse is rarely caused by one failed component. It begins when every surrounding support chooses not to act. Nathan's jaw tightened. That was the first crack. I looked up and smiled. "You're right," I said. "It's probably useless." His shoulders loosened. Then I slipped the textbook into my canvas bag. "I'll throw it away at home." The relief vanished so fast it almost made me laugh. "No," he said. The word came out sharper than he intended. Rain hammered the roof. Downstairs, a box scraped across the hallway floor. Nathan recovered quickly. He always did. "I mean, there's no point carrying it around. Give it to me." He held out his hand. In my first life, that hand had accepted awards, condolences, research grants, and my trust. It had also turned a key while I screamed behind a fire door. I zipped my bag. I said I'll handle it. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he smiled. Of course. That smile frightened me more than anger would have. Because Nathan never fought for anything in public. He arranged for other people to surrender it in private. I walked toward the stairs, but his voice stopped me. "Clara." I turned. He stood beneath the attic's single hanging bulb, surrounded by Uncle Elias's dismantled life. Cardboard boxes rose behind him like miniature buildings awaiting demolition. "You know he wasn't well near the end," Nathan said. "He wrote strange things. Accusations. Paranoid theories. Keeping his notes could upset Aunt Mira." There it was. The story told afterward. Uncle Elias, the unstable old engineer. Uncle Elias, ashamed after the Halcyon Tower disaster. Uncle Elias, drinking alone. Uncle Elias, slipping from a riverside footbridge after midnight.
No witnesses. No proof in key.
No reason to question Nathan, his brilliant former student and devoted nephew. In my first life, I had accepted every sentence. This time, I heard the architecture beneath the lie. "I won't upset her," I said. Nathan watched me descend the stairs. I could feel his silence following me. It did not feel empty. It felt loaded. I did not take the textbook home. That was the first decision I changed. In my first life, Nathan knew my habits better than I did. He knew I left my keys in the blue bowl beside the door. He knew my bedroom window never latched properly. He knew I attended a grief counseling appointment every Thursday at 4. If I carried the book into my flat, he would have it before sunset and leave no sign he had entered. So I drove past my street. At the next intersection, I switched off my phone, removed the battery from the small emergency tracker Aunt Mira insisted I keep in my bag, and continued toward the oldest part of the city. Uncle Elias had once taken me there when I was 12. He had shown me a narrow stationery shop squeezed between a tailor and a shuttered cinema, and told me that the owner could repair anything made of paper. The shop was still there. A brass bell chimed when I entered. Shelves leaned beneath ledgers, maps, folios, and books bound in faded leather. The air smelled of glue and cedar. Behind the counter sat a silver-haired woman wearing a magnifying lens over one eye. She looked at me, then at my bag. "You have Elias Vale's face when you're frightened," she said. I froze. Her name returned to me slowly. Beatrice Shaw. Uncle Elias had called her B. In my first life, she died 3 weeks after the estate clearance, supposedly from a fall in her workshop. I had attended her funeral without understanding why Nathan stood at the back and left before the service ended. This time, she was alive. "Did my uncle leave something with you?" I asked. Beatrice closed the ledger in front of her. "He left instructions. Those are not the same thing." I placed the textbook on the counter. The color drained from her face. Then the bell above the door rang again. I spun around. A delivery boy entered carrying a parcel, muttered an address confirmation, and left. Beatrice waited until his footsteps disappeared before turning the sign to closed and locking the door. "Who saw you take this?" she asked. "Nathan." Her eyes shut briefly. "That was unfortunate." "Unfortunate got me killed last time," I said. The words escaped before I could stop them. Beatrice stared at me. I expected disbelief. Instead, she studied my face with the quiet attention of someone comparing a damaged original to a restored copy. "Elias used to say time was only honest when it repeated itself," she murmured. I almost asked what she meant, but she had already pulled the textbook closer. She examined the spine, tapped the boards, and ran a thin metal tool beneath the inner hinge. A faint click sounded. The back cover lifted away from the binding. Inside was a cavity no thicker than my little finger. It was empty. For one crushing moment, I thought I had failed before beginning. Then Beatrice angled the cover beneath her lamp. A translucent sheet had been pasted flat against the board. Lines appeared beneath the glue. Not writing, but a technical drawing printed in pale gray. "It's a transfer layer," she said. "Heat releases it." She carried the cover to a press, placed blotting paper over it, and warmed the surface with a small iron. Slowly, the hidden sheet separated. A floor plan emerged. I recognized the Western Research Wing of Westbridge Institute, where Nathan and I both worked. The basement archive was marked in red. So was the sealed materials laboratory above it. Between them, Uncle Elias had drawn a vertical line through a service shaft that did not appear on any public plan. Beside the shaft, he had written 3 words. fire travels upward. My lungs forgot how to breathe. That shaft explained the smoke. In my first life, the investigators claimed an electrical fault began in the basement archive. They said I had bypassed safety rules while retrieving restricted files. But the hottest part of the fire had been above me. Smoke had poured downward before flames appeared. The official report was physically impossible. Uncle Elias had known. Was he investigating the institute? I asked. Beatrice did not answer immediately. She unfolded the transfer sheet and revealed a second drawing beneath the first. Halcyon Tower, the 27-story residential building that partially collapsed 9 years earlier, killing 11 people and ending Uncle Elias's career. The red markings matched. A hidden service void, unregistered materials, a fire path concealed inside a structural column. Different buildings. Same design. Your uncle did not design the failure at Halcyon, Beatrice said. He discovered it. Then why did he confess? He didn't. Every newspaper had quoted his admission. Every documentary repeated it. I had watched Uncle Elias stand outside the inquiry with cameras flashing around him and say, "The responsibility is mine." Beatrice opened the textbook to the title page and held it against the lamp. Tiny pinpricks formed a pattern around his name. Your uncle said responsibility was his, she told me. The reporters supplied the word blame. He was protecting someone who promised to bring forward the original calculations. Nathan.
No.
Nathan was still a student then. A colder possibility entered the room. His father. Beatrice nodded. Uncle Roland Vale was Westbridge Institute's director, chair of the Halcyon Redevelopment Board, and Uncle Elias's younger brother. He had built a public career defending safety standards. In my first life, he delivered the eulogy at Elias's funeral with one hand resting on Nathan's shoulder. He told Elias to remain silent for 48 hours, Beatrice said. He claimed he needed time to secure the files. Then the files vanished, the inquiry closed around Elias, and Roland never corrected the record. My anger arrived quietly. It did not burn. It settled into place. What does Nathan have to do with it? Beatrice looked toward the locked door. Nathan inherited more than his father's ambition. She pointed to several numbers written beside chapter headings. Page 19. Page 63. Page 118. Page 204. At first glance they're references, she said. But Elias never referenced his sources this way. These are dates without years. I turned to page 19. A sentence had been circled. Materials do not lie. They preserve the history of every force applied to them. In the margin, Uncle Elias had written, "Ask CM why Sample 7 was replaced." CM. Professor Celeste Marr, head of materials engineering. My supervisor. The woman who, in my first life, testified that I stole Nathan's work. A pulse began beating behind my eyes. Beatrice touched my wrist. Do not confront anyone, she said. Elias made that mistake. He believed shame would force honest people to speak. He did not understand how useful silence becomes when everyone profits from it. I looked at the hidden floor plans, the coded margins, and the old green cover Nathan wanted destroyed. What did Uncle Elias want me to do? Beatrice reached beneath the counter and withdrew a sealed envelope. My name was written across it in his hand. He wanted you to finish reading. I opened the envelope with Beatrice's bone-handled paper knife. Inside was a single index card. Clara, if you are reading this, I failed to tell you the truth, while I still had the right to ask for your trust. Do not forgive me quickly. Read chapter 8. Begin with what is missing. That was all.
No affectionate farewell.
No explanation of how he died. No heroic instruction to expose the guilty. Uncle Elias knew me too well to turn grief into an order. He had left me a choice, which made the burden heavier. Chapter 8 was titled Fatigue, Fracture, and Delayed Failure. Someone had removed 12 pages with a razor so cleanly that I had mistaken the gap for a printing defect. The remaining page numbers jumped from 167 to 180. What was there? I asked. The section on forensic sampling, Beatrice said. Elias used it in his lectures. She crossed to a cabinet and searched through old publisher catalogs. While she worked, I switched on my phone. 14 missed calls appeared. 9 from Nathan. 3 from Aunt Mira. 2 from an unknown number. A message arrived before I could read the others. Nathan, where are you? Then another. Nathan, Aunt Mira is upset. Bring the book back. He had stopped pretending I could throw it away myself. I typed I needed air. I'll return later, then place the phone face down. Beatrice found an early instructor's edition of the same textbook. Chapter 8 was intact. I laid the books side by side. Uncle Elias had underlined words in the chapters before and after the missing section. Their first letters formed an instruction. Check library copy 3B. Westbridge's engineering library kept historical textbooks in rolling stacks beneath the main reading room. Copy 3B would be accessible with a staff card, but every entry was logged. In my first life, I had entered those stacks on the night I died because Nathan sent me a message saying he had found evidence, clearing my name. The trap had begun with a book request. I photographed every page, every mark, and both hidden plans. Beatrice copied the files onto 3 encrypted drives. She kept one. I slid another beneath the removable insole of my shoe and mailed the third to a rented post office box under a name only I knew.
Better, she said.
But evidence is not protection if no one understands it. Then I'll make them understand. Carefully. She caught my sleeve before I reached the door. Clara, Elias did not die because he lacked proof. He died because he showed the proof to the person he loved most.
Aigle Roland.
The warning stayed with me all the way back to the house. By then, dusk had turned the windows into mirrors. Aunt Mira sat at the dining table with both hands wrapped around untouched tea. Nathan stood behind her chair. Uncle Roland had returned and was speaking softly to a man in a charcoal suit whom I recognized as the family solicitor. Every head turned when I entered. Nathan's gaze dropped to my bag. I had placed a different green textbook inside it, one Beatrice found in a damaged books box. The original was locked in her fireproof cabinet until I could retrieve it safely. Aunt Mira rose. Where were you? I went for a drive. I'm sorry. You frightened us. Nathan moved toward me. I'll take that. I let him. His fingers closed around the bag, and for the first time since my rebirth, I watched confidence return fully to his face. He believed he had restored the original sequence. He believed the dangerous object was once again inside his control. He unzipped the bag beneath the table, shielding the movement with his body. I pretended not to notice. Uncle Roland studied me across the room. He was 60, broad-shouldered, and silver-haired, with the polished calm of a man accustomed to being believed before he spoke. Uncle Elias had been narrow and untidy, always carrying pens in his shirt pocket. Seeing Roland after learning the truth felt like looking at a successful counterfeit. We were discussing Elias's papers, he said. The Institute has offered to archive anything professionally relevant. How generous. His eyebrows lifted slightly. Nathan pulled a replacement textbook from my bag. The cover was nearly identical, but the title was different. Structural Systems in Public Design. His thumb stopped. I looked directly at him. Something wrong. The room shifted toward us. He smiled, but his eyes hardened. I thought this was the moldy one from upstairs. It was worse than moldy. The spine fell apart when I opened it, so I put it in a public bin. I found this one in the boot and forgot it was there. Aunt Mira sighed with relief. Uncle Roland's expression remained still. Nathan held my gaze. He knew I was lying. I knew he knew. That was useful. A liar who believes his target is unaware moves patiently. A liar who knows he has been seen begins correcting the room around him. He calls people, deletes files, pressures witnesses, changes routines. Every correction leaves weight on a different support. I wanted Nathan moving. Uncle Roland dismissed the solicitor and suggested we eat. Halfway through dinner, he raised the subject of my position at Westbridge. Celeste tells me your fellowship review is next month, he said. In 3 weeks. You've done promising work. Nathan drank water, without looking at me. In my first life, that review ended with security guards escorting me from the institute while colleagues stared at their desks. Nathan's paper on progressive collapse used my simulations, my field measurements, and whole paragraphs from my draft. Celeste claimed the timestamps proved he created them first. I had spent months trying to understand how. Now I knew where to look. Actually, I said, I'm changing my research focus. Nathan's glass paused near his mouth. Oh, Uncle Roland asked. I'm interested in forensic discrepancies between archived plans and physical construction. Halcyon Tower might be a useful case study. Aunt Myra's fork struck her plate. Uncle Roland did not blink. Nathan did. Only once, but I saw it. Halcyon has been studied to death, he said lightly. Buildings don't mind repetition. Families do, Aunt Myra whispered. Guilt pierced me. She had loved Elias through disgrace, insomnia, and the long years when strangers spat the word murderer outside their gate. I did not want to reopen her wound, but someone else had kept it open beneath a bandage of lies. I'm sorry, I told her. I won't involve you. Uncle Roland folded his napkin. Your uncle's case was settled by experts, he said. Grief can make old questions feel new, Clara. Do not confuse emotional discomfort with evidence. It was the kind of sentence that sounded wise until you noticed it answered nothing. I lowered my eyes, playing chastened. You're right. Nathan relaxed by a fraction. Then my phone vibrated. The unknown number had sent a photograph. It showed Beatrice's shop from across the street. Beneath it were 5 words. You should have thrown it away. I deleted the photograph before anyone at the table could see it. Then I asked Aunt Myra whether she wanted more tea. Fear had controlled my first life because I treated every threat as an emergency. I answered immediately. I accused people without proof. I ran toward the person who claimed to offer safety. This time, I let the sender wonder whether the message had reached me. After dinner, I went upstairs and shut myself in the guest room. I pushed a chair beneath the handle, turned on the shower, and called Beatrice from a prepaid phone. She answered on the first ring. Someone photographed your shop, I said. I noticed him. My grip tightened. Are you safe? For the moment. He was young, nervous, and very bad at pretending to inspect tailoring. Nathan hired him. Perhaps. Or Nathan wants you to assume he did. That stopped me. There were 2 dangerous men in the house, not one. Nathan had locked the fire door in my first life, but Uncle Roland had built the system that made the murder look plausible. Either could be directing the surveillance. Worse, they might not be working together anymore. Shared crimes do not create loyalty. They create mutually assured destruction. Beatrice told me not to return to her shop. We agreed on a dead-drop location for the textbook if she needed to move it. Before ending the call, she said, Copy 3B was not listed in the library catalog until the week before Elias died. Someone wanted him to find it. Someone helping him? Or someone leading him? I barely slept. At 6 the next morning, Nathan knocked on my door carrying coffee. He wore running clothes and the easy smile of a cousin checking on me after a difficult day. I owe you an apology, he said. I was pushy about the book. I accepted the cup, but did not drink. Stress makes everyone strange. Exactly. He leaned against the frame. You got a message at dinner. Was it work? A pharmacy reminder. You deleted it quickly. My iron tablets aren't very interesting. His smile held. We looked at each other across the threshold, each pretending the conversation had not become an interrogation. Finally, he said, I'm heading to the institute. Want a lift? That was not convenience. It was containment. I have a meeting across town first. With whom? I laughed softly. You're doing it again. He stepped back, palms raised.
Right.
At the bottom of the stairs, Uncle Roland stood in the shadowed hallway. I did not know how long he had been listening. By 8, I was at Westbridge. The institute occupied 3 connected buildings of pale stone and dark glass. Students crossed the central courtyard with umbrellas tilted against the rain. Above them, banners displayed Nathan's face beside the announcement of his upcoming public lecture. building safer cities through transparent design. Transparent. The universe had developed a cruel sense of humor. I entered through the eastern wing, used a service staircase to reach the library, and waited behind a shelf until the morning archivist completed her first inspection. Her name was Lila Chen. In my first life, Lila had slipped a handwritten note into my coat after my dismissal. Check who amended your access log. I found it too late. By the time I returned to speak with her, she had resigned and disappeared from the institute directory. Now she was alive, standing 10 meters away, pushing a trolley of returned books. I stepped into her path. Lila, I need your help, and I need you to decide quickly whether you trust me. She stared at me over the trolley handle. That is an alarming way to begin a conversation. Someone can alter library access records. Her expression changed. Only slightly. Enough. You should report that to systems administration. I did. I lied. They sent the complaint to Nathan Vale. Lila's fingers tightened around the trolley. There it was. You already suspected him, I said. She looked toward the circulation desk. Lower your voice. I told her I needed copy 3B of Principles of Structural Failure without creating a visible request. I did not mention Rebirth, murder, or the hidden plans. I showed her the photograph of Uncle Elias's instruction. Lila read it twice. Come with me. She led me through a staff door, down a concrete staircase, and into the rolling stacks. The air cooled. Fluorescent tubes flickered overhead. She selected aisle 14, released the locking wheel, and opened a narrow passage between shelves. Copy 3B was missing. A strip of clean dust marked the place where it had stood. When was it removed? I asked. Lila checked a handheld scanner. According to the system, never. It's here. Footsteps sounded at the far end of the stacks. Lila switched off the aisle light and pulled me between two shelves. Through the gap, I saw Professor Celeste Mar enter. She wore a cream coat over a red dress, immaculate as always. Nathan followed her. My heart slammed once against my ribs, then steadied. I told you she came here, Celeste whispered. Nathan looked down the dark aisles. Did she request the book?
No.
Then how do you know? Because you asked me to flag it 8 years ago. Silence. The number struck me harder than their presence. 8 years ago was before Uncle Elias died, before my fellowship, before Nathan and I worked together. He had been watching that book since he was 23. Celeste continued. This is becoming reckless. Roland said the attic was cleared. The book wasn't in the bin. You saw Clara take it? Yes. And then you allowed her to leave? Nathan's voice cooled. Choose your next sentence carefully. Celeste did not retreat. You are not your father.
No, he said.
I clean up after him. A metal shelf pressed into my shoulder. Beside me, Lila had gone completely still. Celeste lowered her voice. If Clara reads Elias's notes, she will find the sample records. If she finds those, she will find my signature. Then you should have destroyed them. I tried. Elias moved the originals. Where? That is what copy 3B was supposed to tell us. Nathan turned toward the empty space on the shelf. For the first time, both of them realized the book was gone. Celeste's breath caught. Nathan did not speak. That silence was different from the one in the attic. It was no longer loaded. It was calculating distance. He took out his phone and called someone. Dad, he said when the line connected. We have a problem. Lila slowly raised her own phone and photographed them through the gap. Nathan and Celeste left without finding us. We waited a full minute before moving. What sample records? Lila whispered. I don't know yet. That was not a comforting answer. She rolled the shelf closed behind us and led me into a restricted conservation room. From a locked drawer beneath the repair bench, she removed copy 3B. You took it, I said. 3 days ago. Someone requested a destruction review for water damage, except there is no water damage. She placed the book on the table. I thought it was an attempt to remove a donation record. I did not realize people were willing to stalk the stacks over it. The book looked ordinary.
No anotaciones. No luo sepajes.
No hidden cavity in the cover. Then I remembered Uncle Elias's card. Begin with what is missing. Chapter 8 was intact, but the index had been torn out. I compared the final page of the book with Beatrice's photographs. Along the exposed binding edge, tiny handwritten numbers descended vertically. 4, 1, 7, 2, 9, 3. A shelf code. Lila entered it into the internal archive map. The result was not a book location. It was a materials storage locker in the sealed Western laboratory. Locker 417,293. The same laboratory marked in red on Uncle Elias's hidden floor plan. The room where the fire had started in my first life. The sealed laboratory required 2 credentials and a rotating access code. I had 1 credential. Lila could obtain the code. The second card belonged to Celeste. We did not need to steal it. We needed her to open the door for us. At noon, I sent Celeste a photograph of Uncle Elias's hidden halcyon plan with 1 sentence beneath it. Locker 417,293. Tonight, before Nathan empties it. She replied 7 minutes later.
Come alone.
8:30. Nathan's public lecture began at 8 in the auditorium across the courtyard. Uncle Roland would introduce him. Most senior staff would attend. Celeste had chosen the hour because the western wing would be empty. So had I. Before sunset, Lila copied the library logs and sent them to 3 reporters under a timed release. Beatrice delivered the original textbook to a barrister who had represented halcyon families. I scheduled every photograph, recording, and floor plan to reach the police at 9 unless I canceled it with a code. Then I made one final preparation. I told Nathan exactly where I was going. Not directly. I left my institute tablet unlocked in the staff lounge, with the message to Celeste visible on the screen. Nathan's assistant passed through that room every evening at 6. By 7, someone had searched my office and removed nothing. The bait had been taken. At 8:25, Celeste met me beside the western stairwell. Her face was bare of makeup, and for the first time, she looked older than her carefully controlled voice. You should not have brought Elias's plan into this building, she said. You should not have signed a false sample report. Her eyes flashed. You know nothing about what happened. Then tell me. She scanned her card. The first lock released. Lila activated the second credential remotely from the conservation terminal. Celeste entered the rotating code, and the steel door opened. The laboratory smelled unused, but a thin track through the dust led toward the storage lockers. Celeste noticed it too. He's already been here, she whispered. We ran. Locker 417293 stood open. Inside was an empty foam case, a broken wax seal, and a portable incineration pouch used for contaminated samples. The pouch was warm. Celeste swore and reached inside. Her fingers found a narrow glass vial wedged behind the locker hinge. It contained a sliver of gray concrete labeled H7 Original. 1 sample survived, I said. 1 is enough, she answered. The lights went out. A magnetic lock slammed behind us. Emergency strips glowed red along the floor. At the far end of the room, a man stepped from behind the testing chamber. Nathan. He held the missing foam case in one hand. You always did need someone to lead you to the answer, he said to me. Celeste moved in front of the vial. Open the door. Nathan looked almost disappointed. You invited her here. You knew what would happen. I thought we could force Roland to negotiate. My father does not negotiate when he can bury the problem. The auditorium applause began faintly through the walls. Uncle Roland was taking the stage across the courtyard, welcoming donors and officials to a lecture about transparency. Nathan placed the foam case on a workbench. Give me the vial, Clara.
No.
In your bag is an old textbook filled with the confused notes of a disgraced engineer. In my hand are the remaining samples. The institute records say you entered a sealed laboratory without authorization. This can still become an embarrassing episode instead of a criminal one. You used the same argument on Uncle Elias? His eyes changed. Not fear. Memory. Celeste spoke before he could answer. Elias found the substituted concrete after Halcyon collapsed. Sample 7 showed polymer filler and excess aggregate. Roland approved the cheaper supplier. I certified the replacement report. Nathan turned toward her. Stop. Her voice shook, but continued. Elias agreed to wait 48 hours because Roland promised to confess. Instead, Roland destroyed the procurement files and blamed the design calculations. Years later, Elias found proof that Westbridge used the same supplier in this wing. Stop talking. He came here the night he died, Celeste said. He called Nathan. The room seemed to narrow around us. I looked at him. You met him at the river. Nathan's face became blank. That blankness was the answer. Celeste backed toward the emergency panel. Elias recorded their conversation. He told me afterward that Nathan had promised to testify against Roland. But he never reached home, I said. Nathan set down the case. You think this is simple because you died believing you were innocent. My blood turned cold. Celeste stared at him. What did you say? He realized too late. I touched the small transmitter sewn beneath my collar. A green light blinked once. Every word was streaming to Lila's computer and, from there, onto the auditorium projection system. Across the courtyard, the applause stopped. Nathan lunged. I stepped behind the hydraulic testing rig and slammed the safety barrier between us. He struck the mesh with both hands. You remember the fire, he said. It was no longer a question. I remember you locking the door. Celeste made a broken sound. Nathan looked toward the ceiling camera. On the auditorium screen, his face would be filling 6 meters of white canvas. Uncle Roland, donors, journalists, engineers, and families of the Halcyon victims were watching him in real time. He could still have remained silent. He had survived for years by saying only what could be defended later. But then the laboratory speakers crackled, and Uncle Roland's voice came through from the auditorium microphone. Nathan, he said, do not say another word. Security is handling this intrusion. The command did what evidence could not. It reminded Nathan that his father intended to survive him. His silence broke. Security. Nathan shouted toward the camera. Tell them who ordered the Halcyon substitutions. Tell them who made Celeste change the sample report. Tell them who told me Elias would destroy our family unless I stopped him. Uncle Roland's voice vanished. Nathan laughed once, harshly. Now you're quiet? The safety barrier rattled as he struck it again. You promised I would never carry this alone, he continued. You said Elias slipped. You said Clara's archive fire would look like another electrical fault because you had already paid for the inspection report. You designed every lie, and each time you made me stand in front of it. I stared at him through the mesh. There was the confession I had wanted across 2 lives. It did not bring relief. It sounded like a building collapsing one connection at a time. Celeste pulled the fire alarm. This time, the doors unlocked. Security officers entered with 2 detectives who had been attending the lecture at the barrister's invitation. Nathan tried to run through the service shaft, but Lila had already sent them Uncle Elias's hidden plan. They intercepted him at the upper exit. Uncle Roland did not flee. Men like him rarely believe consequences are real until someone touches their arm. He remained behind the auditorium lectern while the screen replayed Nathan's words above him. When I entered, hundreds of faces turned toward me. Aunt Mira stood in the front row. She had come to hear Nathan speak. Instead, she had heard how her husband died. I wanted to cross the room and hold her, but the barrister stepped onto the stage and asked for the surviving sample. Celeste carried the vial forward with both hands. Uncle Roland finally looked at me. You have no idea what Elias was like, he said. He would have destroyed all of us for a technical principle. I opened the old textbook to the sentence beneath Uncle Elias's name. A building collapses twice, I read aloud. First in truth, then in the story told afterward. Roland's expression shifted. He recognized the line. He wrote that after you betrayed him, I said. You were not protecting the family. You were protecting the second collapse. For once, he had no polished answer. The room waited. His silence did not look powerful anymore. It looked small. The arrest did not fix everything by morning. Truth is not a switch. It is demolition performed in public. For weeks, every person involved tried to save a different part of the old story. Roland claimed Nathan had misunderstood private conversations. Nathan claimed years of manipulation had made him incapable of refusing his father. Celeste admitted falsifying the sample report, but denied knowing anyone would die. Westbridge suspended senior administrators, hired outside investigators, and issued statements full of passive verbs. Mistakes were made. Records were misplaced. Concerns were not escalated. 11 people had died at Halcyon, yet language kept searching for a room where no human being had to stand. The surviving vial ended that escape. Independent testing confirmed Uncle Elias's original findings. The concrete contained an unapproved filler that weakened under repeated heat and vibration. Procurement emails recovered from Roland's private server proved he knew the supplier had failed safety tests. Lila's access logs showed Nathan had altered my research files, backdated his drafts, and created the request that drew me into the archive on the night of the fire. The fire itself had not been an accident. Neither had Uncle Elias's fall. Nathan eventually confessed that he met him on the footbridge. He insisted he only meant to take the recorder from Elias's coat. During the struggle, Elias struck the railing and fell into the river. Nathan watched the current carry him beneath the bridge and called Roland before calling emergency services. That delay lasted 19 minutes. Aunt Mira listened to the number in court, without moving. Later, outside, she gripped my hand so tightly our knuckles whitened. 19 minutes, she said. He might have been alive. I could not offer comfort disguised as certainty. I only stood beside her while cameras shouted questions from behind the barriers. Celeste accepted a reduced sentence in exchange for testimony. Roland and Nathan faced separate trials. The Institute restored my fellowship, offered compensation, and suggested I return under a new supervisor. I declined. That surprised everyone except me. In my first life, Westbridge had been my whole horizon. I wanted its title beside my name, its approval attached to my work, its locked rooms open for me. Dying inside one of those rooms taught me something Rebirth confirmed. Access is not the same as belonging. Lila and I established an independent forensic archive for whistleblowers in engineering and public construction. Beatrice repaired damaged documents and taught us how to preserve evidence without erasing the marks left by fear. Aunt Mira donated Elias's papers after reading every page herself. She kept his fountain pen. I kept the textbook. 1 year after the lecture, the city installed a memorial plaque near Halcyon's rebuilt entrance. It named the 11 residents who died. Beneath their names, a second inscription acknowledged Elias Vale for identifying the concealed material's failure and attempting to expose it. There was no word like hero. He would have disliked that. After the ceremony, I returned alone to Beatrice's shop. Rain tapped against the windows, lighter than it had been on the day of the attic clearance. The repaired textbook waited on the counter, its green cover cleaned but not replaced. Every crack remained visible. I found something while resuing the spine, Beatrice said. She handed me a narrow strip of paper that had been folded beneath the binding thread. My pulse quickened. After everything, I still expected another code, another name, another door hidden behind a wall. Instead, Uncle Elias had written only this. Clara, evidence can prove what happened. It cannot decide who you become afterward. I read the sentence twice. Then the shop bell rang. For one wild second, I expected Nathan to walk in smiling. The year erased, the trap reset again. My body remembered before my mind did. My hands went cold. My lungs tightened. But it was only Aunt Mira carrying 2 cups of coffee and complaining that the rain had ruined her shoes. The fear passed. That was the moment I understood I had truly changed my life. Not when Nathan confessed. Not when Roland was led from the auditorium. Not when the court restored Uncle Elias's name. It happened when a door opened behind me, and I no longer assumed death had entered. Aunt Mira placed a coffee beside the textbook. Are you finally finished with that thing? I looked at the cracked cover. the repaired spine, and the sentence that had survived where no one thought to search. "No," I said, "but I'm finished letting other people tell me what it means." That evening, I carried the book home. I did not hide it beneath a floorboard or lock it in a safe. I placed it on the center shelf of my study, where sunlight could reach the faded title. Beside it stood the public halcyon report, the corrected laboratory analysis, and the first case file accepted by our new archive. The file belonged to a young woman whose supervisor had told her a failed bridge inspection was not worth ruining her career over. I called her the next morning. She answered in a whisper and asked how I had obtained her documents. "I didn't," I said. "You sent them to us." There was a long pause. Then she admitted she had nearly deleted everything. I looked at Uncle Elias's textbook while she spoke. "Don't," I told her. "Hold on to it." Outside my window, the city moved beneath structures most people trusted without question. Walls carried weight. Bolts held tension. Concrete remembered every shortcut hidden inside it. So did people. Uncle Elias had once told me that failures announce themselves quietly. A hairline fracture, a warped hinge, a sound dismissed as settling. People do the same. Nathan's first warning had not been his threat in the attic. It had been the speed with which he reached for a book he claimed was worthless. I finally understood. In my first life, I threw away the one object that could have exposed the lie, and Nathan's silence became the strongest wall around me. In my second, I held on. The wall cracked. The truth entered.